Whether we are masculine men or feminine women of faith, we all have human leadership, roles, responsibilities, and even opportunities to exercise leadership, develop this training for the kingdom, whether we're in a family or our occupations, or if we're in an educational system, and even within team sports. There's captains and coaches and team captains and so forth and etc. However, we must be careful to not step above our individual calling and boundaries, whether we're men or women, for that matter, in our faith-based leadership. Now, that's, might as well say, Torah faith-based leaderships, according to our Father's will and His Word. We all want to have optimal happiness and blessings. As we also say, more power to us. We want more of His power, not just our own intelligence or our own talents or abilities. It's easy to take things a little too far or think too much of ourselves. And there's also leading by example, which is, in my opinion, the most important form of leadership, is being willing to lead by example, just setting the right example, even though the majority or others around you might not be. As I continue this playlist on, the title as I've given this playlist, Biblical Women Leadership and Preaching, and including my second video I did on the 7 prophetesses we see in the Bible, and there's other women prophesying as we see in the scriptures, but I addressed that topic as well. And what about the kingdom? How different will it be versus being human beings? Leading to, pun intended or no pun intended, leading to the title of this playlist video, as I'll switch to my slide. Kingdom of Yah. Now, that is the first part of that holy sacred name. Some of you don't want to say it. Some of you have different opinions on how to pronounce it. I don't want to get into that or be offensive, but I'd like to broaden my audience here as we even sing hallelujah. And regarding to women and men in leadership, well, we all have this calling to be kings and priests. But is it now, or are we just in training now for something later? That's one little issue I'll address in this, as the scriptures have enough to say about this. Now, humans will become different in the kingdom's fullness. I'm talking about the kingdom here in its fullness, beginning with the millennium of the Messiah ruling this earth in a way that we don't see today. As certain Sadducees challenged the Messiah, as we read about in Matthew chapter 22, verses 28 through 30 here, it says, "So in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had married her." But answering Yeshua, taking this from the Tree of Life version, Yeshua said to them, "You've gone astray because you don't know, you don't understand the scriptures or the power of Yah. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven." Now there's a great diversity to the angelic realm. Therefore, we can see a big difference between resurrected spirit beings for eternity compared to our temporary human lives here on earth. Which is more important to you? This is an important question to answer as we progress through this playlist. Do we want to be in bigger congregations, have more followings, more following of the leaderships? What's more important, this temporary physical life? A lot of people will prioritize that even within their faith. But what is more important? We should ask that, whether we're men or women. I'm not just pointing the fingers at women through this playlist series, because men are guilty of much of the same. Many have been. But as the Apostle Paul wrote, "For I consider that the sufferings," let's always remember the difficulties of this present time, and referring to us being human beings, and quoting from Romans 8 verses 18, here it says, "These present difficulties, these sufferings that we go through are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us." And catering this to this topic in this playlist series, sometimes we feel like we're not important enough in the body. We feel like we don't have a role or much leadership skills or abilities, and so that might be difficult or like a suffering to not be elevated as much as we would like to within any body of believers. But let's get back to this glory part of being like angels, remembering that there's diversity even within the visual appearances that are described in the scriptures. Even within creation, there's visual differences between humans, flowers, and the vegetable kingdom and the animal kingdom. He likes diversity, so I don't want to kind of put everything into a box. And this spiritual realm, there are appearances that I don't claim to understand how it all works. I just know it's a much deeper level than our three-dimensional world, but somehow there are visual appearances, and some can say, well, it's all metaphoric. But let's take a look here in Ezekiel. My first scripture going here, Ezekiel 1, referring to the angelic realm. He says, "Also from within it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man." Likeness of a man. Each one had 4 faces. So it's not just angels transforming temporarily to look like men, but this is what they look like in the spiritual realm with spiritual eternal bodies, is the conclusion I come to. And so it says here, each had 4 faces and each one had 4 wings. Their legs were straight. I guess they don't have knee joints like we do. And the soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet, cows' feet. In other words, baby cows. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings, so they had like human hands on their 4 sides, and each of the 4 had faces and wings. Here in verse 9, their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. Verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Here we see it again, the face of a man. Each of the 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, and each of the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and each had the 4 the face of an eagle, I guess, on the back side. So they didn't have to turn. They would just go forward in whichever direction, however they do that in the spiritual realm. We'll find out more when we get into that kingdom, more literally than just flesh and blood. Continuing in Ezekiel 41, verses 18 and 19. And it was made with cherubim and palm trees, a palm tree between the cherub and cherub. Each cherub had 2 faces. Verse 19, so that the face of a man was toward the palm tree, a palm tree, in one side, and the face of a young lion toward a palm tree on the other side. Thus it was made throughout the temple, all around. This is what many refer to as the 3rd temple, a description of a temple that we can't find being made in history exactly like that, according to dimensions and descriptions. And that's another topic of them by itself. So let's move on to my next slide here. Human-terrestrial transformation in the kingdom's fullness. So let's address this topic here. The resurrection chapters, it's referred to often. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, I'm going to pick up in verse 35 here. It says, but someone will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? This is a question we all have. What's it going to be like? I want to know more. Well, I can't say I know it all with this, but let's go with what the scriptures say here. In verse 40, jumping down to 40, it says, there are also celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies. And people get into UFOs out there. I don't want to go off on that deer trail, but if they are not just high-tech military operations that are top secret, and they can't let the public know about it, and especially the adversarial nations out there, our Creator's allowing these terrestrial bodies pose and deceive those who are not being called and want to reject truth anyway. And as we know, that as it says in Revelation 12:9, that dragon deceives the whole world. He allows that prince and power of the air, as we see in Ephesians 2:2. He has control and power of the air to a degree that whatever the Creator allows him to have to deceive those who are not being called or those who are rejecting truth. And it says that those who do not love the truth, even our Creator sends strong delusions in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. To those who don't love the truth enough, they will be deceived by lies. Nevertheless, not to go off on, since we see these words celestial and terrestrial, and people like to talk about extraterrestrial, those are simply spirit beings posing, or even human beings with good technology posing to deceive people. That's my take on that, my little spiel. But let's go down to verse 49 here. It says, and as we have borne the image of the man of dust. Now that word man is not in the Greek text there. You can see with the italics. King James, New King James is good about putting italics when they translators add words in there. But you can just say the image of the dust. We know that man came from dust. Adam did. And we all are made in this image. We all shall also bear the image of the heavenly. And then man is added there. There's a heavenly realm, a spiritual realm where we'll have spiritual bodies. And I'm not going to get into the context too much, but it does say that we start as physical, natural, and then we go spiritual. It's not like some doctrines out there say we start as spirit beings, or like in reincarnation even, they say we can go from spiritual to physical and go around and bounce around in different bodies as we die and go forth, or we tested in the spiritual realm. The physical comes first when it comes to human beings. We start out as physical. And then there's the opportunity for the spiritual. Verse 50, jumping down to this next verse here. Now, this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood, this is talking about human beings, cannot inherit the kingdom of Yah. And nor does corruption, because our bodies are corrupt. They deteriorate. They slowly fade and weaken and age, even just through the aging process, as well as through the sinful lives that we are all striving to come out of and striving for perfection. But he says corruption cannot inherit incorruption, and I believe he's talking about simultaneously. You can't be both. We're either one or the other, although we have a spiritual side to us. We have this portion of the kingdom, a portion of a spirit in us, and human spirit versus the spirit of our Creator, and to trying to unite and becoming one, to becoming more and more like our Maker up there, and wherever He is and wherever He roams His being. Jumping down to verse 52 through 53 here, it says, as we preach on the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. Many people out there call it Rosh Hashanah. But in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, that last shofar blow, we see 7 of them in Revelation. We see this whole feast of shofars, of shouting, of announcing. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible. So when we're in flesh, we're still corruptible, but when we're raised out and we're no longer flesh, we're incorruptible. And he says, and we shall be changed. Now, we see through this glass darkly now, and the scriptures can't really reveal all of what we'll be like, but we'll be like the angels in some ways, who are made in His image as well. We'll get to that. But verse 53, for this corruptible, referring to our physical bodies, must put on incorruption. And this mortal, here, physical, again, temporary life, must put on immortality to become immortals. So these eternal bodies, interesting to note, the scriptures reveal have faces too. Let's take a look at some. And some might say it's metaphoric, and that's okay if you believe that, but it's interesting to ponder here as our spirit searches the deep mysteries and wanting to understand whatever he can reveal to us in this time and in the flesh here. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 10, it says, "Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones," causing division with little ones and young ones in the faith. "For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven." So he's talking about angels. And we can see in Psalms 91, this isn't new information, that he puts angels in charge over faithful ones, righteous ones, that we have them encamped with us. We see that with Yaakov and Jacob's ladder, and those who want to pull into the same covenant of that, through the Abrahamic covenant being the seed of Abraham, and going forward into the new covenant and understanding all that. I don't want to go off on a big topic like that. That's a broad topic, but sticking with this topic, let's go to Acts chapter 6, verses 13 through 15. It says, "And they set up false witnesses who said," now let's remember these are false witnesses against Stephen in the context, or however you want to pronounce his name, Stephen, but it says, "This man never stopped speaking words against this holy place," referring to the temple, right, in Jerusalem, "and the Torah, for we have heard him saying that this Yeshua ha-Nazareti," and this is from the Tree of Life version, Yeshua of Nazareth, from that area, they've referred to him as at that time, "will destroy this place and change the customs that Moses handed down to us." All right, and this is, remember, false witnesses, false accusations. Well, unless they're referring it to the oral law. Some of the oral laws, as they say, came down from Moses to the Levites, which is a legend. But nevertheless, here, it says here in verse 15, "Watching him intently," they were watching Stephen here intently, "everyone who was sitting in the Sanhedrin saw his face was like the face of an angel." Now, I can't describe that. I wasn't there. And it's interesting to speculate, but angels have faces. We see some diversity in that, even just in the book of Ezekiel and other scriptures. Now, all the angels stood around the throne. Going to Revelation chapter 7:11 here. "And the elders," so there's elders, there's angelic elders there at the throne that our Father likes to use and counsel with, showing how humble and how meek he is, even our Creator. "And the four living creatures, and they fell on their faces." Here we see angelic beings with faces again, "before the throne and worshipped the Most High, the Almighty." So we can see that the spiritual bodies have faces to one degree or another. We can speculate. My personal opinion is not just metaphoric and symbolic here. But of course, we can dive into that realm as we want to speculate as well. But let's go to Elohim. We can see it refers to the Father, the Son, angels sometimes, and even human beings. And they all these categories share a likeness and an image. Believe it or not, this is what the scriptures reveal. And so let's go to Revelation chapter 1. And we'll go all the way back to Bereshit, Genesis as well, as I progress through this slide. But in chapter 1 of Revelation 13 through 16, it says, "And in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man." The word "one" there is not in the Greek text, but "like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the feet and girded about the chest with a golden band." And progressing through there, and here's my point, "and his countenance," this is talking about an angel, an angelic being, was like the sun shining in its full strength. Whoa. And a messenger, an angel, definitely a spirit being. And it could be referring to the Messiah here as well. Going to Revelation 10:1, it says here, and I saw another angel, another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. Now, maybe that's where they get the halo in Catholicism, but this is like a rainbow. A rainbow sometimes is like half. Maybe it was kind of like a hairdo, like a pop-up hairdo rainbow, like half a rainbow, not a full circle. I don't know. I wasn't there. Didn't get that vision. I'd like to ask Yochanan or find out in the future. But nevertheless, it says his face was like the sun. Now, if we try to look at the sun with our human eyes, we're going to get blinded. It's going to destroy our vision. So we need a filter to be able to see it. And of course, how it looks like, that's another thing to get into too much detail. I don't want to get into too much detail outside of scripture or speculation here. But let's go to Daniel chapter 12, referring to even us, hopefully, myself and y'all out there. Daniel 12, verses 2 and 3, here it says, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Verse 3 is the key verse here for this topic. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. And you look up in that firmament, especially in daylight or even at night, you see some bright lights. And the closer you get, the brighter it is, and stronger it is, and more powerful it is. And human beings can't get too close, right, to even the sun or any of those stars if we were able to transport ourselves out there. And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So righteous people are going to also have this brightness and power, and how that is in appearance in the spiritual realm, again, that's something up for debate, but it's really emphasizing all of us human beings are created in his image and will be called to a glory and a greatness that's easy kind of just stick in the physical human realm here. And some even teach that we'll just be like eternal human beings forever. Anyway, let's go to Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. With this understanding, here it says, and then Elohim, is the Hebrew word here, said, let us, or it's like let's. And it's a grammar issue. People say, okay, is it two gods? Is there more than one God being here? I think in Judaism, they have a better explanation of this because they understand angels were also created in his image, like the name Michael literally means like God. You know, the great high archangel Michael was made like our creator in some ways, in some impressive ways. And so this could be, we'll notice here, there's different grammar here, and it's complicated to understand first person plural and third person singular. There's pronouns here. Like as I'm training people in my profession, I'll say, hey, let's go over and do this, when even I'm not even doing it myself, or I'll do it myself and the others won't. But it's using this first person plurality to it, saying let us make man. Now in the context here, we'll see this is talking about both sexes. This is a singular plural pronoun as well, referred to a plural. He says, let's make man in our image. Again, including angels that are there. We know there's elders at the throne. There's angels with faces that are made like men, and so forth, and other ways of images. But it says here in verse 26, getting towards the end, it says, according to our likeness. Verse 27, so Elohim created man, notice as it switches to a singular, into his own image, or into his image. In the image of Elohim, he, singular, made him. referring to man singular, but he says male and female. So here we have singular plural again, referring to one, and sometimes a plural is referring to one doing something in the action, in the verb tense. So he made male and female, he, singular, created them. So I don't want to go off into too much theology here into the nature of Yah, the oneness of him. But we got to see here, there's a lot of different ways to interpret this, but he created us in his image. And it's important to realize that angels also in some ways were impressively made in his image as well. So moving on to the next slide here, as I title, Multiply Human Talents. That's what we want to do for the kingdom leadership. The kingdom leadership will be much higher no matter how much or how little we can multiply our talents. The goal is to multiply, even if more than what we're just given. Try to increase what we can, again, without going above our boundaries and our calling. We've got to be careful it's not just vanity or wanting the spotlight on ourselves. But remembering that all first fruits are called to be kings and priests. No longer human sex genders, as we can see from the beginning of this video slide and what our Messiah said in Matthew 22, that we're not just given in marriage, and it's not going to be like our human, genders that we have in marriage. So we've got to be careful not to take things too hyper literally in the kingdom and in how it is today, that it's going to just transfer in every single way. In 1 Peter 2, verses 4 and 5 here, it says, and you shall come to him, referring to our Creator, a living stone rejected by men, but chosen by Yah and precious. Verse 5, you also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, a holy priesthood to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Yah through the Messiah, Yeshua. So we have the Messiah, Yeshua here, and living stones, we all have this calling. And we could go back to Israel. All 12 tribes were called to be a royal priesthood. Then eventually at the golden calf, only Levi, that tribe, continues to be the priesthood, and all of the other tribes are disqualified after that golden calf experience. And now we have this new covenant where anyone can be grafted in, and in this future, in the kingdom, the ultimate kingdom is what he's wanting humanity to grow and to develop the character and the faith and the submission and obedience that can be impressive and qualified to enter that kingdom for all eternity. Both men and women have great leadership roles. Continuing down in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 7 through 9, it says, now the value is for you who keep trusting. But for those who do not trust, the stone which the builders rejected, this stone has become the chief cornerstone. Verse 8, a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. So we have to keep trusting. We have to keep believing, regardless of the ladder we climb in this life, the leadership roles we carry in this life, or don't carry for that matter. We have to keep valuing and trusting this calling. Otherwise, we're going to get offended by him. And some people don't want to believe in the Bible because it seems like it's too male chauvinistic. And there's problems that people have with this calling and the level that they can reach as a human being. But again, we're putting the temporary life above the eternal life, which is so much greater. Verse 9, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of Yah's own possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Now, people want this role today. Say, well, if that's what I am, then I need leadership in the body of believers, and I need to be a king or a priest or a queen. We got to realize that this is a calling for the future. We're not literally that right now. A lot of scriptures to reveal that we need to be in training for that, but realize that we're not in the fullness yet. We got to be careful not to take it too hyper literally, even though it's in a present tense or it sometimes sounds like a past tense. So as we'll see from the scriptures on this slide, we are called for royalty, fullness, yes, but not yet there. We're not there yet. As Romans 4:17 says, as it is written, and he's quoting from the Torah here, I've made you, quoting what our Creator said to Abraham, I have made you a father of many nations in the presence of him whom he believed. Yah, who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did already. So notice it sounds like Abraham is a father of many nations. He didn't even have Isaac yet when he gave him this promise. And he didn't even enter that kingdom in his physical life. He longed for that kingdom. He traveled. He was a sojourner and a pilgrim. And even those ultimate promises of his covenant were not even fulfilled during his lifetime. Here we see an example of it being spoken of in present past tense, but of something of the future. As an example for us to also apply other scriptures and teachings in this with this understanding and principle. Going to Galatians chapter 3 verses 27 through 29 here, it says, for all of you were immersed in Messiah and clothed yourself with Messiah. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male nor female. Okay, does that mean I'm no longer a male? And some of you out there are no longer females? Again, we got to realize that this is speaking of the future, but we're talking about the present spiritual realm, understanding our calling, that we shouldn't have divisions in the wrong ways. We really got to apply the scriptures accurately in how we understand Jews and Greeks and Gentiles, and that we all can be grafted in and become one. Whether we're slaves, whether we're free, whether we're male, whether we're female, we're all called to be this royal priesthood, this nation. He says here, continuing in verse 28, for you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. Verse 29, and if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Now notice an heir. Like if you're an heir to the throne of the King of England, that doesn't mean you're king yet. That if you continue and you qualify until the time comes, then you can become the king. If you're an heir and if things happen accordingly. But there's no guarantee that just because someone is an heir to a kingship that they're going to automatically predestined to become one. They may give up that crown and someone else may take on that crown. And we can see that in kingdoms and kingships today and of the past. Just because you're an heir doesn't mean that you're there, but it means that you're called to be there and to be in training and to qualify and to have the character and to be able to take on the responsibility when the time comes. So in the meantime, as human beings only, as we're in this flesh only, as it says in James chapter 3 verse 1, it says, my brethren, let not many of you become teachers. And this is referring to of the word in the ministries, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to, if we're not to be teachers in this life, that we won't be teachers in the kingdom. We are to exercise leadership roles, in exercising leadership and the talents that we're given to edify the body and to help others, not just ourselves. And if we do that, then we'll be given amazing priesthood and leadership royalty roles in the kingdom. But in this life, we got to remember that it's not everyone is to be teachers. And we have to be careful that if we want to put ourselves into a place we're not being called to yet, well, we're going to get a stricter judgment. Things are going to backfire. We're not going to have the power of the Almighty behind us, and it'll eventually fail and not continue. So my advice and my humble opinion is to test the waters if you feel super inspired into a ministry or a teaching or a calling. Test the waters, make adjustments based upon the fruits and whatever miracles happen, or if there's a lack of it, and it just seems everything seems to be backfiring. Is it not just attacks from the adversaries? It's easy to just say, oh, well, the adversary's attacking me, but we need to evaluate ourselves. We don't want to be a square peg in a round hole. If we're going for that, then we're going to see there won't be much power behind us, and it'll just backfire in too many ways. And I've seen that myself, and backtrack and say, okay, I need to eat some humble pie here and just keep going, whatever he's calling me and wanting me to do, and just be content with whatever he calls and wants me to do. Going to Acts chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, it says, even as the wise Sanhedrin, this is my words right here, even as the wise Sanhedrin Torah teacher Gamaliel said to the Second Temple leaders regarding the original apostles here. We see this as he wasn't no evidence that he was a believer in the Messiah or Yeshua, but he was the one who trained Paul, Shaul, who became this great super apostle and emissary under with the new covenant, and teaching the Torah more accurately than the Jewish oral law. But nevertheless, here it says, notice what this wise Sanhedrin Torah teacher said, and now I say to you, keep away from these men and let them alone. For if this plan or this work is of men, or we can say of women today, if women are trying to do a ministry that they're not being called to do and think they are, he says it will come to nothing. Right? It'll be chastened, it'll be stamped out eventually, and the power of the Most High will not really be behind it. But verse 39 here, it says, but if it is of Yah, you cannot overthrow it, lest you even be found to fight against him, against the Almighty, the Most High. So we got to be careful we're not fighting against him and putting down other ministries or trying to take them down or persecute or ridicule. But just, be careful with this in this regard. And if the shoe fits, wear it in whichever way it does, as I even do for myself. And let's remember, he tests the righteous. He's testing us all who think we're righteous. As we see in Psalm 7, verse 9, oh, let the wickedness of the wicked come to an end, but establish the just. For the righteous, Yah tests the hearts. He's going to test our heart and our mind, our consciousness, and what we're conscious and what we're aware of, and what our desires and our passions are leading us. Got to balance it out. And here's that holy name, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He tests the righteous. I'm not saying he tempts us and tempts us to sin or to do things that are wrong, but he does put us into tests to see how we respond, or allows even things to come into our life to test how we're going to respond, like we see in Job's case. But he says, but the wicked and the one who loves violence, his soul hates. Of course, we don't want to be cold, but we don't want to be lukewarm either in these end times. 2 times in Psalms there. Let's go to a couple times here in Jeremiah. First one in 11, verse 20 here. It says, but here, the O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, you who judge righteously, testing the mind. Here we have testing the mind and the heart. Let me see your vengeance on them. For you, I have revealed my cause. And so it's easy to see people going the wrong way and being prospered through sin and through not following the biblical examples, that it seems like it's more blessings to go the wrong ways. Well, or if we want justice and revenge, well, remember, vengeance is his, and he's testing our mind and our heart and our love, for that matter. Jumping down to chapter 20, verse 12 here of Jeremiah, it says, but O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, you who test the righteous. So if you're righteous, he's going to test you. If not already, he will. And if you have already, he will continue. He says, and see the mind and heart. So there's no place we can hide. There's nothing we can have in the closet from him. He says, let me see your vengeance on them, for I have pleaded my cause before you. And so I don't want to get into the context of that, but just mostly looking at he tests the righteous. He knows our minds and our hearts and our motives. We got to be careful. The road to hell, as they say, can be paved with good intentions. So let's really verify through scripture, through wise counsel, through whatever means we can to make sure what we're doing is right and how we're doing it is right. And let's beware of becoming square pegs in round holes, if I may use that modern idiom. Let's examine ourselves. Not pointing the fingers at others so much, but ourself, our motives, our gifts, our callings, matching it with the holy inspired scriptures as this playlist is intending to do, and not just referring to commentaries or cultural conclusions on this matter, but really letting the scriptures reveal the most and the spirit behind it that comes from him. To examine ourselves and what we're doing and our roles. Do we desire more self-exaltation? It's something I examine myself with. Hopefully you do out there. Is it we just want that spotlight too much? What is our real motivation and reason behind everything? Do we have too much wrongful pride? Any unconscious narcissism? What is narcissism? Also known as and defined as vanity, or egotistical admiration of one's idealistic self-image and attributes. Do we think too highly of ourselves? And we often get humbled when we do. I know I have, and hopefully don't need too much more of that. But nevertheless here, where are we called and needed the most? According to his word and his will, within his body. Our talents, our gifts of the Spirit, whether it be in a family, in a body of believers, in our public setting, in our public light, whether in occupation or at school, leadership roles, opportunities to exercise that are called, how can we progress with that? Is there anything else to consider in this regard? Opening this up for discussion regarding this playlist, even this whole playlist of biblical women leadership and in preaching roles and taking on, getting behind the podium on the Sabbaths and the holy days and whatever topics you want to come up more specifically. Feel free to comment on the videos and or email me privately at TorahTruthSeekers@gmail.com. And subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not already. Appreciate new subscribers and old subscribers. So I want to thank all of you for your strong, sincere faith in anything you've watched and listened to in this playlist series and any of my other Torah Truth Seekers uploaded videos. And so may the Most High Elohim bless all of you and keep you in the faith.